In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint the Grashrak Ravagers warband from the Warhammer Underworld upgrade Beastgrave. A big thanks to my sponsors Goblin Gaming for getting me this kit really early. If you want 20% off your wargaming, then check out the link in the description. Alright, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to paint the flesh, and the colour we're going to use for the flesh is Gorthor Brown. So it's going to work this on over the prime. Again, it's a Zenithor prime, so it's black first, white over the top. Just gives some natural shadow, makes it a bit easier to pick out certain bits. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint the legs with Gorthor Brown, get that fur as well. I'll explain why when we come to kind of darken that up a little bit later on. So we also want to get the arms done as well. So we'll get the arms done. And when it comes to the skin on the neck, what I want to do is I want to get the back bit there with a bit of the Gorthor Brown, but what I want to do is I want to have this a lighter colour. I want the head to be a lighter colour as well, so just want to get that there as the Gorthor Brown, and then we'll come back and we'll start to put the next layer on there. Once I've finished all those Gorthor Brown areas, the next colour I'm going to use is Baneblade Brown. So we're going to use this to just get into the neck area and the top of the chest there, and we're also going to get the face done in this colour as well. Well, the reason I've chosen to go with a more brown skin tone, I think it just gives that bestial look to the model rather than it having the human flesh tones. And the other thing we're going to do with the Baneblade Brown is we're just going to highlight some of these areas as well on here and the fingers. So just work across the model, any bits that you think should be highlighted, just run that Baneblade Brown over them. Like you see, it's not actually that different in terms of the tone, but it just gives a really nice blend without you having to do too much work over there. Excuse the boy racers outside with their big exhausts and significance issues. So yeah, I'll go around to do some highlighting with the Baneblade Brown. We'll come back ready for the next skin tone. The next colour is Rakarth Flesh, and we're just going to use this on the face and where we've got the neck just in there. And across the top of the chest and on the mouth. We're also going to just put a little spot of it on the hands where we've got the skin at its thinnest. And the other colour we're going to use Rakarth Flesh on is all these little bits of strapping here. Let's just work it around on all the little bits of strapping. We've got this little bit of bandage around the arm there. We've got this strapping running down here as well. Don't worry too much about getting it on the other areas because we're going to go in and change those colours anyway. So I'm just going to work around, make sure I've given the face a nice highlight. Go into all those areas. I've done all the strapping on there, and we'll come back and have a look at the next step. The final highlight for the skin, and this is just for the facial area, the neck, and the top of the chest, is Pallid Wych Flesh. So this is just going to be a line highlight. Let's just work it on just the highest areas. Just a little bit on the neck, and this is just a line highlight. There you go, a little bit on the ears as well. And then that's the main part of the flesh complete. I want to blend the flesh together a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade. And I'm just going to run this over all the flesh. And also you can run it over all those bits of Rakarth Flesh that you've done. So all those bits of bandage there. Just make sure that it goes over everything, so it'll, once it dries, it'll pull all those different shades in together. Same for under here, and as well as the front of the face. Now what you want to make sure of is that it doesn't pool too much on there. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of it. Make sure that you cover off any of those bandage areas you've done, like on the back here. Make sure we get that covered in Agrax Earthshade, and then we'll come back and have a little look at just popping another final highlight on there. Once that Agrax Earthshade wash is dry, we just want to pop some highlights using Pallid Wych Flesh just on some of these straps. So just follow the line and run the brush over. I get some on the straps here as well. Just to get some colour differentiation in, and that's working out quite nice. Get a nice highlight on there. I've also gone back in on the face with the Pallid Wych Flesh and kind of just made those same adjustments. So there we are. I'm going to just work my way around to get the rest of this cord done, and we'll come back and we'll start to have a look at the black leather. Next up is all the black leather. So the base coat I'm going to use for this is Corvus Black. So we're just going to work this on. Be careful popping it on. See, it's quite thin, so it's going to need 2 coats. But just be careful with bits you may have already painted. And also any bone bits like this, because I'm going to go back in and use a lighter colour on those. So if we can just look after this dark colour and make sure that it doesn't go over the bone. You know, these little straps we can repaint anyway, that's not a huge issue if it goes on those. But just with the main bits of bone, we want to keep that as clear as we possibly can. So don't forget we've got the through there as well. Now we've got this bit here on the back. So like I said, this is going to need 2 coats because it's quite thin, but that's good because it keeps the detail on there. So we can do that, do the back bit there, and also the mask on this chap's head, and then we'll come back, shade and highlight it. Once the Corvus Black is dry, I'm just going to take some Nuln Oil and just paint it over all that Corvus Black. And the reason for this is simple. Just give us a nice little bit of shading in there. You can see I've kind of gone over some of the bits of cream that we did with the Rakarth Flesh and some of the teeth. It's not too much of an issue. We can always go back in and fix those later. So just work your way around and get all of that Corvus Black covered with the Nuln Oil. Just go in and highlight that black once the Nuln Oil has dried. So we're going to use Stormvermin Fur. I'm just going to put a little edge highlight in. So where we've got things like the edge of the leather there, we're just going to draw down it, which is nice and easy. I'm just going to go along the edges there. So this gives us quite a dirty highlight because it's a dirty kind of black leather. I think it's better than having a clean highlight personally. Just going to work around all the edges. And we're going to go on the mask as well. So I'll get that done. We'll get that highlighted, and then we move on to the next bit of leather, which will be the brown leather. I want to use a nice red leather, or reddy type leather, like on the box art. So I'm going to use Mournfang Brown to base that. So we're going to base all the little sort of bits and pieces that are attached to the model here. we've got both bags. Now we've also turned around so we can see a little bit better. We've also got 2 belts. So we've got a belt here where this little knife is scabbarded in, and we've got a leather belt running here, and we've got a leather belt running across there. Just want to get the Mournfang Brown over all that. And the other bits I'm going to do Mournfang Brown as well, just to make them stand out a little bit, is the straps. So he's got all these straps running across him there. They're kind of 2 straps thick, so then they're going all the way round. So I made a little mistake there, so I'm going to correct that with some Corvus Black. But otherwise, get all the straps done and we'll come back and have a little look at shading and highlighting the leather. Once the Mournfang Brown is down, we'll just do a quick shade of Agrax Earthshade over it, just to darken it and pick out some of the differentiations between the strapping and the little bits and pieces. So this is just a nice quick stage. So we'll get that done for all the bits of leather, and then we'll come back and we will highlight it. I'm going to highlight that leather with some Scrag Browns. This is quite an orangey reddy brown. There's 2 ways to do this. Firstly, you know, if you're happy with your brush technique, you can just highlight down the line like that. Or if you're looking at this bag, you can use the edge of the model to actually get that highlight in there. You can also just tap it on a little bit like that as well and stipple it, because that kind of just gives that impression of worn leather. So I'm going to work my way around the bits of leather, make sure all nice and highlighted, and then when I come back we'll have a little look at potentially doing the bone. Then we'll get started on the bone work. So we're going to use Morghast Bone, which is a base paint. We're just going to paint up all these little bits of bone that we've got here. So if it's going on a bit too thin, then of course pop another coat on once it's dry. So we've got this here, we've got the skull here. We've also got all these little teeth around the model that we want to get done. We've got these little skulls down here. We've got the big skull here, which we want to get done, as well as these horns. So take your time and work your way around. Make sure you've got a nice even coat over everything. And the other thing not to forget as well is this is a modelled base, so we've got some skulls actually in the base as well, so make sure we get these painted and these bones down there. So I'm going to go off and finish the rest of it. I'm not going to paint these horns, we're going to do those horns a different colour. We're going to give them like a dark grey colour, but these horns here we do want to do these in bone. Okay, so I'm going to finish off the rest of the bone painting off cam. Make sure you get all those little teeth around there and all the other little skulls as well, and we'll come back for a highlight. Got all that Morghast Bone down, and we're just going to highlight it now with Screaming Skull. So in terms of what that looks like, it's really straightforward. Just all these highest parts of the bone, we just want to get a highlight in. And with these little bits of teeth again, we just want to highlight some of the areas. So where they come down, I've probably missed one there, so I'll go and pop the Morghast Bone back on it. For this skull, it's kind of quite a big highlight we're going to pop on there, because it's going to be getting the majority of the light. And then for this part of the skull, we've just got some line highlights that we can run down there. And you might think, well, why are we highlighting before we shade in? Well, basically what we're going to do is we're going to highlight it all, and then we're going to use a contrast paint. We're going to use Skeleton Horde to really give us that old bone effect. And if we need to, we can go in and pop some more highlights on it again. But I'll also show you a really easy way of getting the transition from a light bone to a dark bone on the horns. So let's go away and finish all the other highlighting now. Don't forget to highlight all these little teeth charms that we've got going on and all the skulls down there, and we'll come back and we'll start to shade it. So we're going to go with Skeleton Horde to cover all the bone. So just work this around the bone areas, and we're not going to worry too much about how we're going to get a colour differentiation to start with. We just want to get this on so that we can get the contrast paint doing what it's meant to. That's giving us shade and highlight. So get it on the teeth as well. Well, we've got this big one here, we're just going to work it around the whole surface area. So I'm going to carry on, work the Skeleton Horde around and let it dry. Make sure it's properly dry before we come back to it. And then we'll have a little look at how we can manipulate some of the colour tones in it. The other thing as well, don't forget the base. But also what I've realised when I looked at the box art, I made a little bit of a mistake. So I've just gone back in here and put some leather in as opposed to the cream straps. And to do that, I've used the same colours for the leather. So it's Mournfang Brown, Agrax Earthshade, and then a Scrag Brown wash when that dries. Once the Skeleton Horde is dry, I'm back in with Screamer's Skull to highlight some of these bits of bone. So this is kind of at the point where you can kind of decide, right, I've had enough of highlighting and don't want to do any more. Or actually I want to throw a little bit more on there. It's entirely up to you. I want to get some of these looking a little bit brighter, so that when it comes to manipulating the shade on here, which we're going to do with another contrast with Wyldwood in a Mo, that actually it still leaves a decent highlight so you can make out the bone parts on the model. So I'm going to go away and finish highlighting the rest of these parts. We'll come back and have a little look at putting some darker shades onto the bone. Okay, so I've added some highlights to the bone. Now before I kind of worry about finishing that off, I want to get the fur done and these kind of stone trinkets. This blade here, the blade on the back, and the horns on the chap. I'm also going to take this opportunity to just kind of scan over, so I can see I've missed some of the teeth here, so I'll need to go and fix them. And I've also got these rocks on the base to do, so I'm going to do them all in Celestra Grey. So this is basically really simple base coating. It's going to move the Celestra Grey all over here. I'm going to pull it over the blood drops as well. We'll do those as the absolute last thing we do on the model. So we've got that bit of stone there. We've got all these kind of stone trinkets that they've got attached, so we want to get those done. And take our time when we're coming around to those bits we've already painted. And we've also got the horns on this chap's head that we want to sort out. So again, just take your time, and we've got the stones on the base that we can get done, and I'm not worrying too much if I get paint on the base itself, because what it'll actually do is just kind of enhance the final effect that we've got. So I'm going to go away and finish the rest of this off cam, and then we'll come back and we'll have a look at shading that part. Forgot to mention to use the Celestra Grey for the fur as well, so on the legs, just around the back there. So if you've not done that, then I sort of say do that before we move on to the next bit. But the next bit is very straightforward. We're just going to use Nuln Oil, and we're going to wash all the bits that we've just painted, just to add a little bit of shade in there. So work it down that scabbard over some of these parts as well. And of course we've got the big knife to do. And we've got the horns on the head. So I'm going to finish washing all of the Celestra Grey with Nuln Oil. Make sure it doesn't pool in anywhere, so we need to keep it moving a little bit on the horns. And we've also got the block work on the base that we need to do as well, so just work it around all of that. Again, not too much of an issue if it goes onto the bottom part here, just try to make sure it doesn't pool anywhere too much. As that Nuln Oil dries, just want to go back in with some of the Celestra Grey. We can start to highlight up the blade here a little, just following the angle really of the model. It's nice and straightforward. As for the horns, we're just going to go with those a little bit like we did the other ones, but in the bone colour, so just using the shape of the model to give that highlight, and then just working in and just following the design on the model, just popping these lines in. Doing all of this with Celestra Grey. So work your way around the rest of the grey parts and highlight them. Where you've got stones, you can just pop an edge highlight on like that. Nice and straightforward. So I'm going to finish that, and we'll come back and have a little look at popping a final highlight on the stone colours. Lastly, on the stone, I want to make it pop a little bit. So I'm just going to take some white scar, and I'm just going to edge highlight using the white scar. Just kind of sparingly, looking for the sharp edges really. Just on the back there. We've got the top of the horns. Just want to run that up there. Just gives that sharp tip on there. And then we've got the stone effect on these kind of charms, but we're just going to pick off the highest sort of bit on there. We've got them on the back here as well, and then we've also got this kind of dagger, so we just want to along the back and just focus on those sharp bits there. If you want, you can put just a little bit on some of the fur, running on the legs and just on the arm as well. It's not too much, just little spots of colour variation which will work quite nicely in terms of adding a bit of a highlight on there for you. So there we are, so that's looking pretty good. So let that dry, and then we'll have a little look at the base and the staff. For the base and the staff, we're going to use Wyldwood. So I'm just going to paint this straight on to the staff, and you can see straight away it's kind of automatically creating a little bit of a highlight on there, which is really, really good. So I'm going to move the Wyldwood around the staff. Don't be, or do be careful getting it on anything you've already painted on there. And what we'll see is this will start to dry really nicely and give a really nice separation and automatic highlight. I also want to use it on the base. So for the base, I just want to run it around everything that's already on there. Because again, it'll give you that natural highlight as it dries. And this is why I wasn't really worried before about getting any other stains on the bottom. So I'm just going to finish off working this around the bottom of the base, and we'll come back and see what it looks like once it's all dried. As that Wyldwood dries there, what I've done is I've mixed some up with 4 parts contrast medium and 1 part Wyldwood, and what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to use this to really kind of differentiate some of this bone colour. So with these horns, for example, I want to make these darker than the actual skull. And the other thing I want to do, I'll turn the model around this way, is I want to kind of get this darker towards the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start about halfway up. I'm just going to work the Wyldwood in there. So you can see straight away that's giving me a nice colour differentiation. Let's do it on the other side as well. Again, about halfway. And this just simulates that growth of bone. You can also use it on some of these parts down here if you want, just to, again, just give a little different bit of coloration. And then what you want to do is, you know, I've painted that on there, but just let it dry off a little bit before you go in for the next stage. So I'm happy with what those horns look like. So for these horns here, we started halfway up. We're going to start a little bit higher up again, just darkening down that bone. We can go back in and fix that, and I'm going to go back in and fix these kind of bits anyway, so don't worry about that too much. Just going to let that dry off, because that's getting to the kind of colour I want. So let it dry and then just keep adding it higher up to the tips, and then when you're happy with it, you can come back and just call it a day. What I am going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of white scar and just pop some additional highlights on some of this bone here. And again, this is just on those sharpest parts, and it's designed just to make it pop that little bit. So when you're looking at it, you can really see a differentiation in the colour. Pop a little bit of skull white there as well, so kind of like an area highlight. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to keep going until I can get a pretty much fully brown right on the tip, and then we'll come back and we'll look at the last steps for the model. I've used some of that Wyldwood and contrast mix just on the bottom part of the leg there, just to give a little bit of depth and just to darken it up as we work through the model, just to get that nice bit of transition. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to paint the tongue. So to paint the tongue, I'm going to use Screamer Pink. Just be careful you don't get this anywhere else, but nice and easy, nice and straightforward. So that's the tongue done. And might pop a shade if it's a bit too bright. And I'm also going to use some lead belcher just to do the few metallic parts that there are on this model. So we've got this bracelet here. Let's just do that quietly. We've got a bit of a buckle on here, which is the strap holding the mask on. We've also got this bracelet here. So I'm going to get those all finished with lead belcher, and when they're finished I am going to pop some Nuln Oil over them just to shade them down a little bit, but that'll be those done, and then we'll come back and have a look at any final steps we're going to do. This chap's looking pretty good now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some blood for the blood god. I'm just going to pop that onto this blood drop that we've got rolling down the dagger here. Then I'm going to wipe my brush clean, and I'm just going to drag it a little bit so that it looks like it blends in with the dagger, so it's not too overpowering when it dries. So that's the model pretty much finished. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away and I'm going to tidy up these little straps here. So again, that was Rakarth Flesh and a Pallid Witch Flesh highlight on these little straps here, which connect everything together just to make them pop out a little bit more. I'm going to take some Baneblade Black and do the base rim, and then this model is pretty much done. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the last screen. So there we go, this Grashrak Ravager is finished, and you can use the techniques from this tutorial for the rest of the warband and any other beastmen you may have. Thanks for watching, I really hope you've enjoyed. Please leave a like and a comment down below if you have. If you want to support the channel, there are some affiliate links in the description which really help. Even if you just want to do your normal Amazon shopping, use the link below, because every little helps, and it does ensure that I can keep doing these tutorials for you. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.